My son's new ML hurled steaming soup at me, yet a single phone call turned the tables completely. Those 6 words lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. My name is Zenobia Washington. I am 59 years old, and this is the story I buried in silence until even the silence started to suffocate me. It happened at my son Orion's wedding reception. His brand new mother-in-law, Saraphina, lifted a steaming bowl of seafood gumbo and hurled it straight into my face. I felt the scalding broth bite into my skin, the spices stabbing my eyes, the thick liquid soaking my ivory silk blouse and dripping down to the floor. The pain was sharp, but what cut deepest wasn't the heat. It was her expression. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. She watched me with that calm, almost peaceful smile. Her eyes were narrow, satisfied, like a woman finally delivering a punishment she'd rehearsed in her mind for years. "That is what you deserve," she said again, her voice steady, chin raised. The ballroom went dead quiet. Forks froze halfway to their mouths. Glasses hovered in the air. Not a single guest stood up for me. No one protested. The only sound that followed was my son's voice. My only child, the boy I had raised alone after his father disappeared. Orion sat at the head table, arms folded, face closed. He looked at me for a second and said in a deep, unshaking voice, "She's right, Mama." For a moment, I felt like the floor beneath me had split wide open and I was falling through years of sacrifices and love and long nights at the sewing machine. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't demand an explanation. I reached calmly for the linen napkin on my lap, dabbed my burning face as carefully as I could, and rose from my chair with the last bit of dignity I still owned. I walked toward the ballroom doors with my back straight, every step steady, even though inside I was shaking so badly I could hardly feel my legs. No one tried to stop me. No one followed. The band was silent. The chandeliers glittered above me like nothing had happened. Just before I crossed the threshold, I did something no one expected. I slipped my phone from my clutch, scrolled to a number I had saved weeks earlier, pressed call, and when the line connected, I spoke only 3 words. "It is time." Then I ended the call, pushed open the doors, and closed them softly behind me. Outside, the hotel hallway was cool and empty. I walked out to the parking area, got into my car, and drove through the polished streets of Buckhead toward my modest apartment in the West End. My face throbbed. My chest felt hollow. And one question spun in my mind over and over like a broken record. How did I end up here? Because there was a time when Orion used to throw his arms around my waist and say, "You're my hero, Mama." There was a time I believed a son's love was something solid, permanent, untouchable. There was a time when trust felt like bedrock. That night, with my skin burning and my heart shattered, I learned a bitter truth I never imagined I'd have to face. Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who wound us the deepest. And sometimes the only weapon we have left is silence. What happened after that phone call is something none of them will ever erase from their memories. But to understand why I dialed that number, why I chose not to go to the police, why I let everything fall apart on its own, I have to start at the beginning. 3 years earlier my life was simple, small, and mine. I lived in a roomy apartment in Atlanta's West End, with a little balcony overflowing with red geraniums and bougainvillea I watered every morning. I had a routine: strong coffee at 7, a sweet potato pastry from Mr. Henderson's bakery on the corner, then downstairs to my tiny tailoring shop on the ground floor. I wasn't rich, but I paid my bills. After Orion's father walked out when our boy was barely 5, I learned something a lot of women don't figure out until much later. You can build an entire life with your own 2 hands and never ask for permission. I hemmed wedding gowns, altered prom dresses, stitched delicate blouses for church ladies who wanted elegance without flash. My hands knew every fabric, every seam, every invisible fix. A good seamstress learns to read cloth the way some people read faces. Orion grew up in that world of thread and pins and late nights. He saw me wake up at 5 to finish an order. He saw me fall asleep beside my grandmother's old singer machine with my hands still full of chalk and straight pins. He saw me cry from exhaustion and then wipe my face and keep going. "Mama, when I'm grown, I'll work hard so you can rest," he used to say, serious brown eyes looking up at me while I flipped pancakes before school. And I believed him, because Orion was a good boy. Quiet, focused, affectionate. He did his homework without being asked. He helped me clean the shop on Sundays and bombarded me with questions about colors and cuts. "How do you know which dress is right for each lady?" he once asked. "Because I listen, baby," I told him. "People always tell you what they need, even if they don't use words." He'd frown thoughtfully, then run off to play basketball with the neighborhood kids. When he turned 18 and got into Morehouse to study business administration, I felt every sacrifice slide into place. He was going to have what I never did. A degree, possibilities, work that didn't break his back and numb his fingers. I took extra orders, doubled my hours, refused loans because I didn't want him leaving college owing anyone anything. He graduated with honors, landed a good position at a real estate firm, started buying suits, and I altered myself. Every Sunday he'd show up with flowers, kiss my forehead, and say, "Thank you, Mama. Everything I am is because of you." For a while I felt complete. Then he met Clementina. The first time Orion mentioned Clementina, his voice changed. There was a softness in it I hadn't heard before, a brightness in his eyes like he was carrying a secret sunrise around inside his chest. "She's special, Mama. Really special," he told me. Clementina was the only child of a wealthy Buckhead family. Her father, Reginald, owned a chain of hardware stores. Her mother, Saraphina, had never lifted anything heavier than a crystal wine glass in her life, but gave orders the way generals gave battle commands. When Orion said he wanted to introduce us, I chose my best dress, navy blue, with delicate embroidery along the collar, a piece I'd made years ago for a cousin's wedding. I styled my hair, put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. I didn't want to impress them with money. I had none, but I wanted my son to be proud. The restaurant was the kind of place I'd walked past but never entered. Tissue-thin napkins. Glass walls. Plates that looked like art instead of food. Orion kept squeezing my hand like he was nervous and excited all at once. Clementina arrived in an immaculate white dress and a smile that stopped just short of warmth. She was beautiful, carefully polite, and distant. We spoke about harmless things. The weather, her career in interior design, vague wedding ideas, even though they'd only been dating 6 months. I smiled, nodded, and played along. But something twisted in my stomach when she said, "My mother can't wait to meet you, Miss Zenobia. I've told her so much." The way she wrapped "Miss" around my name made me feel like an employee. As if Zenobia needed a title just to exist in her world. Orion squeezed my fingers under the table. I tried to see what he saw in Clementina, tried to tell myself I was overthinking things. Back then, I still believed the bond between mother and son was stronger than any outside influence. I didn't know yet that some women size other women up as threats before the first hello. I didn't know that Saraphina had already decided I wasn't fit for her universe before I ever stepped through her door. 3 months later, they invited me to dinner at the Vance home. That was the night the cracks started to show. The house in Buckhead was everything I expected. Large, cold, and stuffed with unnecessary luxury. Crystal chandeliers, thick Persian rugs, and paintings in gold frames that looked like they belonged in a museum, not a family living room. Nothing looked lived in. Everything looked staged. Saraphina met us at the door with a polished smile that never quite reached her eyes. She brushed both my cheeks with air kisses. "Zenobia, how lovely. Come in, make yourself at home," she said, as if anyone could feel at home on those museum floors. Clementina floated down the staircase in a pale pink dress that likely cost more than 3 months of my rent. "Miss Zenobia, you look wonderful," she said, that same careful smile on her lips. Reginald barely acknowledged me, a limp handshake before he sank back into his armchair, glued to the TV, a glass of scotch already half gone. He grunted more than he spoke the entire evening. What hurt most wasn't the house or the riches. It was the way Orion seemed to fit there so easily. He laughed at their jokes. He relaxed in those leather chairs like he'd been sitting in them his whole life. For the first time, it felt like my small apartment, our home, was shrinking behind us. Dinner was served by a young housekeeper who slipped in and out of the room with her eyes cast down. Saraphina snapped instructions without looking at her. More water. Bring the bread. Wipe that spill. I tried to meet the girl's gaze and gave her a small smile when she passed me the plate. She offered the quickest flicker of gratitude before disappearing to the kitchen. The conversation revolved around country club gossip, upcoming vacations, and the shiny new SUV they just bought. One can't just drive anything, right, Zenobia? Saraphina laughed lightly. One has to maintain a certain standard. I nodded, not trusting my mouth to open. Clementina leaned forward, resting a manicured hand on Orion's arm. Mama, I already told Orion, when we get married he has to think about a bigger car. That little thing he drives now is too modest. Orion chuckled awkwardly. The car is fine. It does the job. But we'll have children, she insisted sweetly. We need room. We need safety. Besides, Daddy can help with the down payment. I felt anger rise like heat under my skin. That little thing had been bought with my son's hard-earned money. I knew the overtime he'd worked for it. I knew what it meant to him. I think Orion knows what's best for himself, I said gently but firmly. Saraphina turned those sharp eyes on me for the first time. Of course, Zenobia. He's a very smart young man. That's why I'm sure he'll make all the right choices for his future. For his new family. The way she emphasized new family felt like a door quietly closing in my face. Orion stared at his plate. He didn't contradict her. After dessert, creme brulee I barely tasted. Saraphina lifted her wine glass and smiled. The only thing that really matters is that Clementina and Orion start well. Without burdens. The word hung between us. Clementina left the table for the restroom. Reginald nodded off in his chair. Saraphina leaned closer, voice low but razor-sharp. Zenobia, I think you're reasonable, so I'll be frank. Orion is a good boy, but he's used to a simple life, and that's fine. However, he is joining our family now. Our family has expectations. Expectations. I repeated. Yes. Clementina needs stability. Orion needs to focus on his career, on building a home with her, not looking backward. He has to move forward without emotional attachments. I have never held my son back, I whispered. I'm sure you believe that, she said with a chilly smile. But now Orion has other priorities. And I'm certain that as a good mother, you will know when to step aside. My throat burned. Before I could answer, Clementina returned and the housekeeper brought dessert plates we didn't need. When we finally left, Orion was quiet all the way home. At my building, he asked, "Did you like Saraphina, Mama?" "She seems like a very forceful woman," I replied cautiously. He smiled. "She's amazing. She and Clementina are so close. I love that." I wanted to ask, "And us? Aren't we close anymore?" But the words stuck. I kissed his cheek, climbed the stairs to my apartment, and brewed myself a cup of coffee in my old stoneware mug. The one chipped at the rim, the one that had seen every season of my life. The fine china cup Saraphina had gifted me that night sat on the table. It was beautiful, white, thin, gold-rimmed. I poured coffee into it and raised it to my lips, and couldn't drink. That cup wasn't a gift. It was a message. You don't belong in our world. I set it down, untouched, and reached for my old mug. That one knew my hands. That one knew my mornings. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet question stirred. How far will that woman go to push me out of my son's life? The months that followed felt like walking barefoot over broken glass. Every step hurt, but I kept going anyway, telling myself, this is normal. Sons grow up. They get busy. They build their own lives. I tried to believe it. But deep inside, I knew this was different. I wasn't allowed to let go. I was being peeled away. Orion's visits, once weekly and predictable, became irregular. First they shifted to every other Sunday. Then once a month. Then, when we can, Mama. The excuses always sounded the same. Sorry, Mama, we're having lunch with Clementina's family. Sorry, Mama, Saraphina invited us to the club. Sorry, Mama, we're looking at venues. I said I understood. I said he was busy. I said it was natural. But each apology was another stitch pulled loose from the seams of our life. Then one afternoon he called with a piece of news that lit a spark of hope in me. Mama, Clementina wants you to come with us to pick her wedding dress. She says you're an expert with fabrics and wants your opinion. For the first time in weeks, my heart lifted. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe Clementina did want to include me. Maybe I was finally being welcomed in, not kept at the edge. I arrived early at the boutique, a gleaming shop in Buckhead where a single gown cost half a year of my income. Clementina arrived late with her mother and 3 friends who chatted and snapped photos as if they were at a fashion show. Miss Zenobia, I'm so glad you made it, Clementina said and brushed my cheek with a polite kiss. We need your expert eye. They sat me on a plush velvet couch while she emerged in dress after dress. Lace, tulle, satin, long trains, pearl buttons. Her friends squealed and clapped. Saraphina commanded the staff as if she owned the building. No one asked what I thought. Then Clementina came out in a strapless French lace gown with an endless train. What do you think, Miss Zenobia? She asked, spinning in front of the mirror. This time, all eyes turned to me. It's lovely, I said honestly, but the strapless cut doesn't flatter you as much as something with sleeves or delicate straps would. You have beautiful shoulders. A bit of lace there would frame you better. The air went still. The friends stopped giggling. Clementina laughed, a brittle sound. It's just that this style is in fashion. I don't know if you're very up-to-date with trends, Miss Zenobia. Her friends snickered. Saraphina stood and placed a possessive hand on her daughter's shoulder. My baby looks stunning in anything. This dress is perfect. We'll take it. Yes, Mama, Clementina said, relief washing over her face. You're right, Mama. Mama. She called Saraphina that with ease. Meanwhile, I remained Miss Zenobia, as if I were nothing more than a polite stranger. Afterward, outside the shop, Orion was waiting. Clementina rushed to show him photos of the gown. I'm going to look gorgeous, right, love? You'll be the most beautiful bride in the world, he said. I lingered at the edge of the sidewalk, clutching my purse, feeling like a ghost. How did it go, Mama? Orion asked eventually. Did you like the dress? It's very nice, I said, swallowing the truth. Thank you for inviting me. That's what I wanted, he replied, looking relieved. As if my role was to approve the script, not participate in it. Saraphina came over and slipped her arm through Orion's. We're going to lunch to go over final details. Come along, Orion. Of course, he said. And Zenobia? Clementina asked quickly. Will you join us? Before I could answer, Saraphina smiled. Oh no, darling. I'm sure Zenobia is tired. Besides, we'll be discussing very specific arrangements. We don't want to bore her. Orion stayed silent. He didn't say, my mother is coming. He just kissed my cheek and walked away with them. I watched them from the sidewalk until they disappeared, then turned and took the bus home because I didn't want to waste money on a car ride. On the ride back, tears slipped out, quietly and quickly. The kind of tears you wipe with the back of your hand before anyone truly sees you. At home, my stoneware mug waited. The china cup sat on the table, still untouched. I looked at it for a long time and thought, this will not get better. It will only get worse. But I wasn't ready to accept that. I told myself my son would wake up. That he'd remember who he was. That he'd remember me. A few weeks later, he invited me to dinner, just us, like before. I dressed carefully, choosing a burgundy dress I'd sewn myself, with subtle embroidery along the neckline. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found not just Orion, but Clementina beside him. "Sorry, Mama," he said, a little sheepish. "She wanted to come along. I hope you don't mind." "Of course not," I lied. All through dinner, Clementina talked about the honeymoon in Bora Bora, the condo in Buckhead her father planned to gift them, the way proper couples needed to start their lives. When the bill came, Orion glanced at the check and cleared his throat. "Mama, could you lend me $2,000? I spent a lot this month on wedding expenses. I'm a bit tight." $2,000. I didn't have $2,000. But I gave him almost everything I had put aside for the light bill and emergencies. "Don't worry, son," I said, handing over the cash. "You can pay me back whenever you can." "I'll give it back next month," he promised. He never did. I never asked. Because at that moment, I realized something terrible. I had stopped being his mother. I was his safety net. His last resort. His uncomplaining lender. The wedding date approached like a storm on the horizon. Orion's calls grew shorter, his tone distracted. "How are you, Mama?" "I'm fine, baby. And you?" "Busy. Gotta run. Clementina needs me. Love you." Click. The real blow came on a slow Tuesday at my shop. The bell rang, and a delivery boy handed me a manila envelope with my name scrawled in black ink. No return address. I opened it at my work table and slid out a stack of glossy photographs. At first, they didn't make sense. Orion, standing outside restaurants. In a parking lot. At a hotel. Always with a woman at his side. Not Clementina. Saraphina. My hands began to shake. In one photo, Orion and Saraphina left a restaurant, his hand resting at the small of her back. In another, they stood in a parking lot, faces too close, his mouth near her ear. In another, they entered a hotel, St. Regis, his arm wrapped snugly around her waist. I flipped through them in disbelief until one image ripped a sound out of me I'd never heard before. On a balcony at night, Orion stood behind Saraphina, arms around her eyes closed, her face tilted back against his chest. The pose wasn't motherly. It was intimate. Possessive. Lovers, not in-laws. I dropped the photos, rushed to the bathroom, and vomited until there was nothing left inside me but dry heaves and tears. My son. My only son. The boy I had carried alone. The boy I had raised with blood and thread and sleepless nights. He was sleeping with his fiancée's mother. A woman 20 years older. A woman who had belittled me over and over. And suddenly, everything aligned. Her hatred. Her insults. Her insistence that I step aside. It wasn't just class or status. It was a competition. She wanted Orion all to herself, and I, his real mother, was the reminder of who he used to be. When I finally stopped shaking, I washed my face and went back to the shop. The photographs lay scattered on the chair like a crime scene. I gathered them, placed them back into the envelope, and sat in front of my sewing machine, staring at the black thread hanging from the needle. That was the moment the woman I had been, the one who swallowed insults, who always forgave, who always tried to understand, died quietly inside me. In her place, someone new stood up. Someone who would no longer stay silent. I picked up my phone and dialed a number a client had once whispered to me, a private investigator who found the truth no matter what. "This is Booker Hughes," a calm male voice answered. "How can I help you?" "My name is Zenobia Washington," I said. "I need you to find out everything you can about the relationship between my son and a woman named Saraphina Vance." Booker and I met at a quiet cafe in Decatur. He looked ordinary enough, graying hair, glasses, neat shirt, but his eyes were sharp and patient. He slid a thick folder onto the table. "Miss Washington," he said gently, "what I found isn't easy to hear. You might want to brace yourself." "I already know what I'll see," I replied, fingers interlocked so they wouldn't tremble. He shook his head. "No. You think you know. You don't. He opened the folder. The first pictures were similar to those I'd already seen. Orion and Saraphina entering restaurants, hotels, and an apartment building in Midtown. Booker tapped one of the documents. This apartment is leased through a shell company, he explained. But the funds trace back to Saraphina's personal account. It's clearly their meeting place. There were hotel records, St. Regis, the Four Seasons, the Ritz, rooms booked under Saraphina's name, but security footage showed them checking in together. How long? I choked out. The earliest record is from about 18 months ago, he said. A year and a half. My son had been involved with his fiancée's mother for over a year. Long before the engagement, long before the fancy dinners. Booker pushed more documents toward me. Bank transfers. Large amounts of money moving from Saraphina to Orion. 10,000 here, 20,000 there, 50,000 at one point. What is this? I asked, though I already knew. That's your son being financially supported by Saraphina, Booker said plainly. There was more. Information on Reginald's finances. The towering facade of wealth was hollow. The hardware chain was drowning in debt. The Buckhead house had multiple mortgages. It's all smoke and mirrors, Booker said. They're broke. Saraphina knows everything is about to collapse. He showed me the details of Clementina's trust, a fortune from her grandmother, locked away until Clementina married. Once married, she could access it freely. If she were to die while married, everything would automatically pass to her spouse. I felt my heart freeze. So if Clementina dies after marrying my son, Orion inherits, Booker finished quietly. And given the relationship between him and Saraphina, I didn't want to hear the rest. Then he placed a small recorder on the table. I managed to plant a microphone in the apartment, he said. Legally, it's complicated. But you need to hear this. He hit play. Orion's voice filled the space between us. What if Clementina finds out? He sounded tense, uncertain. Then came Saraphina's voice, smooth, coaxing, dangerously tender. She won't, my love. Clementina only sees what she wants to see. But after we're married, Orion said, voice wavering, how are we supposed to keep this going? A rustle. A pause. Listen to me, Saraphina said. Clementina isn't going to be an obstacle forever. You marry her, wait a year, maybe two. Then things happen. Accidents happen. Saraphina, I can't. You can't do what? She cut in. You can't be happy. You can't have the life you deserve. Orion, I love you. Not the way Clementina does. I love you completely. When this is over, we'll be together with all the money we need. No more hiding. Silence. Then my son's voice, tiny and broken. Okay. I'll do what you say. Booker stopped the recording. I stared at the table, the folder, the coffee that had gone cold. My son. My boy who once promised to work hard so I could rest, agreed to marry a girl and let accidents take her. Booker's voice was soft. You could go to the police with this. They'd stop the wedding. They'd investigate both of them. Your evidence is strong. And my son? I asked. What happened to him? He'd likely face charges, fraud, conspiracy, maybe attempted murder, depending on how the DA sees it. He could face years in prison. In other words, I would be the one who delivered him to the law. I need time, I said finally. Booker nodded. Think about what you can live with. When you decide, call me. I walked out of that cafe with the folder in my bag and the world spinning differently. I thought about going straight to the police. About calling Clementina, showing her everything. About confronting Orion and demanding he look me in the eye while I played that recording. But I didn't move immediately. Because what I wanted, more than punishment, was understanding. I wanted Orion to see himself clearly. I wanted Saraphina's carefully curated life to crash down around her. And I wanted it to happen in a way no one could blame on me. That's when another name came to mind, Clementina's grandfather, Cornelius Estrada. The man who had built the hardware empire from nothing, who had left his fortune in trust for his granddaughter, who didn't tolerate lies. We had met once at a family lunch I'd been reluctantly invited to. An old man with kind eyes had sat beside me while everyone else tried to pretend I wasn't there. "You're the boy's mother, right?" he had asked. "The seamstress." I nodded. We talked about work done with hands, about long hours and aching backs, about how children change when money appears. He'd mentioned his daughter Saraphina, with a weary sadness. "She doesn't visit much," he had said. "Too busy pretending to be important. But my granddaughter still does. She hugs me. That's why everything is in her name now. She has a heart." When our conversation ended, he pressed a card into my hand. "If you ever need anything, call me," he'd said. "I trust people who work with their hands." 3 weeks after I got the photos, I did. We met in his small craftsman house in Inman Park, full of old furniture and family pictures. He poured us strong coffee and listened as I laid every piece of evidence on his dining table. Photos, bank statements, recordings. By the time I finished, his face had gone pale, then red, then hard. "My granddaughter is in danger," he said. "Yes," I answered. "And my son is part of the danger." "Why come to me and not the police?" he asked. "Because if I go to the police, my son goes to prison. And as angry as I am, as betrayed as I feel, he is still my child. I can't be the one who hands him over. I want Clementina safe. I want my son to pay for what he's done without me being the executioner. And I want Saraphina stripped of everything she's built on lies." Cornelius covered my hand with his old, work-scarred fingers. "You're a brave woman, Zenobia," he said. "I'll help you. But you must be prepared. When this explodes, and it will explode, you will suffer. Your son may hate you. People will talk. You may end up alone." "I'm already alone," I answered quietly. He shook his head. "You still have hope. When this is over, that hope may be gone. Are you sure you can live with that?" I thought of Orion's laughter as a child, of his pride at graduation, of the man he had chosen to become. "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." We made a plan. "You will go to that wedding," Cornelius said. "You will act like everything is normal. And when they show who they really are, you call me. I'll bring what needs to be brought." "And what will you do?" I asked. "First, I'll get my granddaughter away from that house," he said. "I have lawyers. I'll get a protective order. I'll freeze the trust so no one can touch her money. Then we'll file charges against my daughter and let the law do its work. Your son, he hasn't crossed the final line yet. He'll lose everything, but he'll stay out of prison, for now. That will be his punishment." "That," I said, "is exactly what he deserves." The day of the wedding arrived like a thunderstorm. I dressed in a simple navy dress I'd sewn years ago. No shimmer, no extravagance. My mother's pearls on my ears. I wanted to look like myself. Nothing more, nothing less. The cathedral was packed. Clementina's side of the church overflowed with relatives and friends. On the groom's side, there were 3 of us. Me, a distant aunt, and a half-interested cousin. That was all the family Orion had left. When he walked down the aisle in his suit, my heart clenched. For a second, I saw the boy he'd been. Then my gaze slid to the first pew, where Saraphina sat in a champagne-colored dress, glittering with jewels. When Orion passed her, they exchanged a look that made my stomach twist, a look far too private for a woman and her future son-in-law. Clementina looked breathtaking in the strapless gown. Her face shone with a happiness that tore at me. She had no idea. The priest spoke of love, loyalty, truth, words that sounded almost cruel in that space. Orion promised to love and protect Clementina, to build a life based on trust. I wanted to stand and shout, "Liar!" But I stayed seated, my hands folded so tightly the knuckles ached. When the ceremony ended and they kissed, applause thundered around us. I stayed silent. The reception at the St. Regis was a spectacle of white flowers, crystal, and polished silver. They seated me at a distant table with strangers, as if I were a last-minute guest. People made small talk around me. No one really saw me. I watched everything. I watched the way Saraphina directed the staff with a flick of her wrist. I watched the way her gaze followed Orion when she thought no one was looking, and how his eyes searched for hers when Clementina turned away. It made my skin crawl. When it was time for the traditional dances, Orion waltzed with Clementina first. Cameras flashed. Guests sighed. Then came our turn, the dance of the groom with his mother. He offered me his hand. "Mama," he said, forcing a smile. "Orion," I answered, placing my palm in his. We moved slowly to the music, a soft love song that suddenly felt sharp and jagged. "You look beautiful," he murmured, eyes fixed on my shoulder. "Thank you," I replied. "You look handsome too. Are you happy?" I asked after a moment. "Yes," he replied too quickly. "Very happy." "Truly?" I asked. "Or are you just saying what you're supposed to say?" He finally glanced at me, and for a fleeting second I saw something. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "Mama, please," he whispered. "Not now." "And Saraphina?" I asked, voice low. "Is she part of your happiness too?" His body stiffened, his hand tightening around mine. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," I said calmly. "I've seen the pictures. I've heard the recordings. I know about the apartment. I know about the money. I know about the plan for Clementina's inheritance. I know everything, Orion." He stopped moving. Around us, couples continued to dance, but we stood frozen in the middle of the floor. People started glancing our way. "You don't know anything," he hissed. "You're making things up." "I have proof," I said. "I know what you and that woman are planning. Accidents, remember." His face was drained of color. "How could you let her turn you into this?" I whispered. "What did she offer that meant more to you than your own soul?" The music faded as the song ended, but we still hadn't moved. Clementina approached, confusion on her face. "What's going on?" she asked. Then Saraphina swept over like a storm. "Is there a problem, Zenobia?" she asked, all fake concern. "You should probably ask your daughter that," I replied. Saraphina's eyes narrowed. "I think it's best if you leave. This is my daughter's wedding. I won't let you ruin it with your theatrics." "My theatrics?" I echoed softly. "You want to talk about putting on a show?" Before I could say anything else, she turned toward a nearby table, grabbed a still hot bowl of gumbo, and flung it straight into my face. Heat, pain, the crush of humiliation. Gasps rippled through the room. Clementina screamed. Someone called for napkins. I stood there, soup dripping from my hair, my dress, my lashes, and I stared at Saraphina with all the calm I could muster. She smiled that same satisfied smile and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "That is what you deserve." The hall fell silent. And from the head table, my son's voice cut through the quiet. "She's right, Mama." It was then that I reached for the napkin, wiped my burning face, and walked out with my head held high. In the hallway, I dialed Cornelius. "It is time," I said. Then I drove home, my skin stinging, my heart in pieces, but with the sharp certainty that everything was about to collapse. I reached my apartment, peeled off the ruined dress, and threw it straight into the trash. I didn't want that fabric, that night, anywhere near me again. I showered until the last sting of spice washed down the drain, then slipped into my oldest cotton pajamas, the ones soft from years of use. I made coffee in my stoneware mug and sat by the window, watching the city lights, waiting. At 11, my phone rang. "Cornelius." "It's done," he said. "What happened?" I asked. "I arrived at the hotel with my lawyers and 2 police units," he said. "I asked to speak to Clementina in private. When she saw the photographs and heard the recordings, She collapsed. We had to take her to the hospital. The doctors say she'll physically be okay. Emotionally, his voice cracked. My granddaughter is shattered. And Orion? I asked, bracing myself. When he realized we had proof, he shut down, Cornelius said. He tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. Guests started whispering. Some filmed. The whole scene spread like wildfire. As for my daughter, he sighed. She screamed about conspiracies, and said everything was fake. No one believed her. What now? I asked. Clementina is under my care, he answered. We're annulling the marriage. It was barely hours old. The trust is frozen. Lawyers are filing charges against Saraphina for fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. She will likely go to prison. And my son? I whispered. He left around 2 in the morning, Cornelius said. Alone. No bride. No wife. No mother-in-law. Just a suit and a ruined name. He's lost everything tonight. Zenobia. How do you feel? I stared at my empty mug. I expected to feel only anger, but what washed over me was something heavier. Grief, relief, guilt, and a strange lightness. Peace, I said finally. I feel at peace. I did what I had to do. Yes, Cornelius said gently. You did the right thing. The days that followed were quiet on the surface and violent beneath, like a river that looks calm but drags entire trees under. The scandal exploded across the city. Someone had recorded part of the confrontation at the reception. The video spread online, Clementina being taken away on a stretcher, lawyers arriving, Orion standing frozen, Saraphina shouting. People took sides in comment sections and group chats. Some painted Orion as a victim controlled by an older woman. Others called him a gold digger, a monster. The truth settled somewhere in between. He wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the mastermind either. He was weak and greedy, and weakness mixed with greed is a dangerous combination. Cornelius kept me updated. The district attorney accepted the case against Saraphina. The likelihood of prison time was high. Reginald lost the house after the bank foreclosed and ended up alone in a cheap rented room, drinking his days away. I felt no pity. Turning a blind eye is its own kind of cruelty. Weeks passed before Orion finally came to see me. He knocked on my door late one evening, and when I opened it, I barely recognized him. He looked older, thinner, eyes ringed with exhaustion, clothes rumpled. Mama, he said, voice cracking. I stood in the doorway. What do you want, Orion? I need to talk, he pleaded. Please. Against the part of me that wanted to slam the door, I stepped aside and let him in. He sat in the very chair where I'd opened the envelope that destroyed everything. I remained standing across from him. I'm sorry, he blurted out. For everything. For what I did to you, to Clementina. What exactly are you sorry for? I asked. For the affair? For the plan? For the way you treated me? All of it, he said, eyes filled with tears. I never meant for things to go that far. You agreed to hurt that girl for money, I said, my voice flat. You stood by while your lover humiliated your own mother in public. You watched me walk out of that ballroom covered in soup, and you said, "She's right, Mama." Did you mean it? He flinched. I don't know. I was angry. I was ashamed. I was lost. And why did you choose Saraphina over me? I asked. Tell me the truth. He stared at his hands. Because she made me feel like I deserved more, he murmured. You made me feel guilty. Every time I came here and saw your little apartment, your tired hands, your old clothes, I couldn't enjoy what I had. With her, I didn't feel guilty. I never asked you to feel guilty, I said quietly. You chose to feel that way because deep down, you knew you were abandoning me. He cried openly now. I know, Mama. I know. And I have nothing left. I lost my job. No one wants to hire me. My name is trash. I'm staying in cheap motels, spending the last of my savings. I have nowhere to go. And what is it you're asking me for? I said, though I could already guess. Can I stay with you? Just for a little while? Until I find work. No, I said. The word came out calm and firm. He stared at me, stunned. But I'm your son. And because you are my son, I won't let you hide here, I replied. If I rescue you now, you won't learn anything. You'll cling to me the way you clung to Saraphina. You need to stand on your own feet, the way I had to when your father left. I'm not as strong as you, he said. Then you'll have to learn to be, I answered. That's the only chance you have. He stood, wiping his face with the heel of his hand. Someday you'll forgive me, he said. It sounded more like a hope than a statement. Maybe, I said. But not today. Not soon. If you truly change, if you spend time becoming a better man, not for me, not for money, but for yourself, then perhaps one day we can talk again. Not as mother and son picking up where we left off, but as two people starting from zero. He nodded slowly, defeated. At the door, he looked back. I love you, Mama, he whispered. I know, I replied. But love without respect is worth nothing. He left. I stood with my hand on the door, listening to his footsteps fading away. No tears came. My heart hurt, but there was a clarity beneath the pain. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Years have passed since then. 2 long, stretching years. I still live in my West End apartment. I still rise early, make coffee in my stoneware mug, and open my little shop. I still sew wedding dresses for girls who believe in forever. Every time I pin lace onto a bodice, I think of Clementina and whisper a small prayer that her next love will be real and kind. Clementina healed slowly, with therapy and time. She came to visit me once, shy and changed, and thanked me with tears in her eyes for helping to save her life. She now studies psychology and dreams of helping other women who've been betrayed by the people meant to protect them. Cornelius visits often. He brings pastries, and we sit among bolts of fabric talking about children, aging, and the strange ways life punishes pride. His daughter, Saraphina, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. No visitors. No more gala dinners. Just 4 walls and the echo of her own choices. Not long ago, I received a second letter from Orion. In it, he wrote that he had found work in a factory, that he was living in a tiny rented room, that he was going to therapy and attending support groups. He wrote that he wakes up every morning trying to be better than the man he was the night of that wedding. He didn't ask me for money. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He only asked that if we ever crossed paths on the street, I wouldn't turn away. He ended with this. I finally understand that you didn't let me fall because you hated me. You let me fall because you loved me too much to keep saving me from myself. His letter is folded in the same drawer as his baby photo, his graduation program, and a crumpled note he wrote as a child that says, "Mama, you are my hero." I haven't written back yet. But I think I will. Because I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means remembering everything clearly and still choosing not to let it poison you. It means accepting that the past cannot change, but the future might. I'm 61 now. I don't know what will happen between my son and me. Maybe we'll rebuild something small and fragile. Maybe we won't. But I know this. I didn't let bitterness devour me. I chose dignity over revenge. I chose truth over silence. I chose to stand. If my story reaches even one woman who is shrinking herself to keep someone else comfortable, or one mother who thinks she must tolerate anything to prove she loves her child, then everything I lived through will have meaning. We are stronger than we think. We can survive betrayals that should have broken us. We can let go without ceasing to love. I close this story the way I began my nights for decades. Stoneware mug in my hands, coffee cooling slowly, city lights shimmering outside my window. The fancy china cup sits in a cupboard, unused. Pretty but hollow. A relic of a life I was never meant to live. The mug is plain, sturdy, and a little chipped. But it is mine. It has held my tears and my strength. It has been there on good mornings and unbearable ones. In that way, it is like the women people overlook every day, ordinary at first glance, unremarkable to those chasing shiny things. Until life tests them, and you discover they are made of steel.